Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending. I just wanted to let you know that we will begin this session in 1 minute. We're going to allow 1 more minute for people to come into the room, but you are in the right place. In 1 minute, we will begin the webinar, Expanding Renewable Energy in Pakistan's Electricity Mix with the World Bank, SMAP and USAID. Just 1 more minute and we'll start. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's attended this session, and thank you very much for being here today. We are going to talk about expanding renewable energy in Pakistan's electricity mix, and it's always good news when it's renewable energy. Of course, all the matrices around the world are growing with renewable energy because not only is clean, but it's also cheaper these days in many, many places. So with us today, we have 3 experts that are going to be talking about this topic. In particular, this webinar is actually held by the World Bank, who's done extensive studies on Pakistan's electricity mix and on expanding renewables. So I'd like to welcome our speakers for today. Oliver, please, if you can unmute your microphone and introduce yourself.
Hi there, everybody. Thanks for joining. Oliver Knight, I'm a senior energy specialist in the World Bank and in the South Asia Energy Unit of the World Bank, and was one of the co-leads on the bank side of this study.
Thank you very much, Oliver, and thank you for us putting together this webinar. Next, I'd like to ask Karsten to please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Carsten Schmidt. I'm presenting the consultants team from Tractable Engineering and from Renewable Resources in Pakistan. I was the team leader of this project.
Thank you very much, Karsten. I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions then for you. And last but most certainly not least, I'd like to ask Salis, please, to introduce yourself.
Yes, hi everybody. I'm Salis Usman from Pakistan. I'm currently working as a consultant for a National Transmission and Dispatch Company of Pakistan. It's the largest transmission network operator in this country. And I'm here as a technical consultant. And I have been working for Water and Power Development Authority of Pakistan and NTDC for over 30 years at different positions. And I retired from NTDC earlier this year. And now my last position was General Manager Power System Planning. So for this study, for this initiative, I was actually the team lead of the focal agency, NTDC. And we enjoyed the whole process. I'm sure I'll be sharing my experience throughout whatever we've had this. And let's see, inshallah, in the next few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sally. So here's how it's going to go today. It's a very simple structure. We're going to have Oliver speaking, then Karsten and Salis, and then we'll have the opportunity for to answer your questions. So how can you send your questions? It's very simple. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. There is a Q&A box there that allows us to manage the questions very, very easily so that we can answer to them by text or also live. So please send them through there. And use the chat and continue to introduce yourself. I see there's a lot of people from a lot of different places. You know, we have people from Dubai, obviously a lot of people from Pakistan, and we even have people from the US, and it's not very, very late there. In fact, it's very early. So welcome everyone. I'm really glad to see you can hardly have a better expert speaker lined lineup of expert speakers. So you're going to learn today a lot. So Oliver, you are the first one up. So please, could you prepare your presentations for your speech? And to remind people, we're recording this session, so you're going to have access to the recordings and also to the materials that you're seeing on screen. So don't worry, you're going to have the option to actually see it again if you have any doubts or questions. Go ahead, Oliver.
Thank you, Belen. So everybody, this is the webinar on a report that we launched about a month ago. The report title is there. Yeah, this has been a almost 2-year exercise now. We had a request from the government of Pakistan to provide support on renewable energy, in particular variable renewable energy, so essentially solar and wind, which is what we mean when we use that term, and in particular how to integrate and plan it into the system. The context when we started this study was that there was a generally accepted standard that around 5% solar and wind was the maximum that people were comfortable to incorporate into the system. And yet there was also a realization that probably Pakistan could do a lot more than that. So that was the context that we were kind of keen to work on and really use modern and up-to-date modeling and data to figure out what the optimal amount of solar and wind would be in the Pakistan electricity system. To give a bit of context, we have a broad package of support to the government of Pakistan on renewable energy. This study was the first that we commissioned, and it started in around September 2018. It sounds like a long time. Actually, most of the work was done in the first year, and we obviously were engaging quite consistently, or the team was engaging quite consistently with the government, not just with NTDC, of course, who were the primary counterpart, but also with the Ministry of Energy. And parallel to this was a process of the new Alternative and Renewable Energy Policy 2019, which was also recently put into the public domain. Alongside that was the indicative generation capacity expansion plan, which NTDC was preparing, the second iteration of that, which was actually submitted to NEPRA earlier this year. So both of these things were informed by this study, and we're very happy to see that. And but I think probably more important was the capacity building and the advice that was given, but that was flowing between the consultancy team and NTDC. Just very quickly, the 3 other things that we're working on. We have, following up on this study that you're hearing about today, we're finalizing a VRE locational study, which will help, the intention is to help figure out where all that solar and wind should go in the country and the optimal positioning of that solar and wind between the different provinces, and also looking at some of the transmission constraints. The third study we're working on, which will be a few more months to come out, will be a renewable energy competitive bidding study. So to help AEDB, the Alternative Energy Development Board, with their strategy for implementing competitive bidding under the new policy. And then finally, we're just starting work on a new study looking at distributed energy solutions. So things like rooftop solar, battery energy storage, also some energy efficiency and a few other things in there. So that's the package right now. We also have work, of course, on many other parts of the energy sector, hydropower, energy access, energy efficiency, etc. But just to keep things simple, this is our work on renewable energy. And with that, I'll turn over to Carsten. I mean, let me just close out by thanking very much Carsten, obviously, the Tractable team, but in particular also NTDC and the power system planning team, which was led by Salis until a few months ago, which is why Salis is here with us today. The collaboration between those two teams, I think, was really a part of the success of this study. So the bank team really played a minor role in this. And really, I think hats off to those two teams that made this study a success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oliver. I'm going to ask you, perfect, to stop sharing so that I can ask Carsten now to share his screen and to take the microphone off. And we've had a few questions about the materials. Don't you worry, you've signed up for this webinar, so you will receive in a few days a link to the recording, and also you'll be able to download the materials that you're seeing on screen, so you will have access to actually analyzing them again. So you don't have to worry about it, you will definitely get it. And in a minute, perfect, you are ready now, Karsten. We can see your screen. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, I would be ready. So, assalamu alaikum to the east again from myself. A very good morning to the west, and hello to Europe and Africa. It's a big pleasure to present these results on behalf of the team. The first slide, I thought it's kind of raising your appetite. It's about lunchtime in Germany, where I'm sitting now. I would like to raise your appetite in two ways. Like, one is for the coming slides, but as we are limited in time, it is really focusing on the main results. I would like also to raise your appetite for the report, which is available online on the World Bank site, and further discussions to come. And the third kind of appetite, I have a big appetite for your questions to go into discussion, because that's the most interesting part for myself. You've read the headline. So the study was about looking at the economics, but also the technical impact of putting more wind and PV, variable renewable energy, into the generation mix of Pakistan. We were asked to look at the challenges, opportunities, and of course not the general one you have worldwide, but the particular one of the Pakistan system. And I can tell you there are quite a lot of challenges, but also opportunities. It was mentioned by Oliver already, but I would really like to mention it again, because we wouldn't be here and we wouldn't be able to present these results if we hadn't done it together with the national planners from the TSO in Pakistan, the NTDC, but also the CPPAG, which is the market operator, the single buyer, or the Alternative Energy Development Board, and there are many more, which I really would like to highlight, and that was the setup of the project. I would like to mention the two objectives. The first is to also provide some input for the government, recommendations, consultancy on the analysis and tools, so they can use it to consider VRE in future. And the second objective, and this is the objective of my presentation today, is to look at what role VRE could play in future with regard to cost, but also with regard to the environmental impact, but also the dependency and security of supply. There are a few facts on the project. I only want to mention the timeline. It was now, it's 2 years ago that we started, more than 2 years ago. It took us 1.5 years, and it ended last year with a big stakeholder event in April in Islamabad. But it did not really end, because we got a lot of feedback, and there was, based on this feedback, also the extension of the project. So the results I'm going to present really is considering a quite good range of feedback we got from the stakeholders of the Pakistan power system. I'm going to present the results of this last package, the expansion exercise, generation planning exercise for the future for 20 years. But for you, I also would like to mention the first two tasks, because the third task wouldn't go without the first two, because we had a look at 2 years, and you can do more detailed analysis, dispatch analysis. My colleagues did it if you only look at 2 years instead of 20 years future. So we learned a lot from this analysis to also put it into the assumptions for the third task. And of course, we had to look at the demand and the generation, how it's going to develop in the next years. But now jumping into the results of this task number 3. No, before, I would like to present in a nutshell Pakistan National Power System, and Salis probably would be the best to do it, but I try to summarize it for the people who are maybe not so much aware of Pakistan. So Pakistan is double the size of Germany, and the population is more than double, and the system I would describe as stretched in a way, geographically and seasonally, because, and this is also one issue we had in the simulations, it's like more than 1,000 kilometers reaching from most of the demand in the north, Islamabad, Lahore, and most of the good supply from hydropower, reaching to the south where there is less demand, and most of the thermal power generation. To put it in figures, we had an installed capacity of 35 gigawatt, but they are about 50% of this, so 17,000 in the pipeline under construction or in the final planning phase. We had a peak demand of about 21,000 megawatt, and the generation, the consumption, it's the gross consumption. So the electricity generation is presented there. And here on this graph, you see the issue of hydropower, which is an advantage of the system because it provides flexibility. It's quite reliable compared to other countries, but since it's only in the north, it is really an issue for the network operation. Then you have a lot of combined cycle, very recently installed with imported liquefied natural gas, and you have a growing share of steam turbines running on imported coal and domestic coal. So this is a snapshot of last year, but it's important for you also to understand what's in the pipeline for the next years. You see from the report analysis what it means in terms of energy. You see again the hydro share, it's similar to the installed capacity, similar share of the combined cycle running on gas. And here you see the coal power plants, which still have had a small part in the past, some nuclear power plants, and we had steam turbines running on HFO, for example. And if you look into the future, in the next coming years, we modeled it for 2022, but could be also 2023. You see that there's a big shift. This part, like from the coal power plants and the nuclear, this will be mostly only in the south. So that's what I mean, like that it's a stretched system. And this is the situation we are dealing with when we look into the future, how to integrate renewable energy and look at the advantages and disadvantages, because we have both. In a nutshell, the result is that a high share of variable renewable energy is optimum. It's not that there have to be subsidies to integrate it, but it's an optimum, a cost optimum. And here on the graph, you see how we usually discuss and present it in Pakistan as a not energy share, but the share of the capacity, starting from around 4 to 5% now, because there's already some wind and PV, and going up, reaching about 40% in the long term. I would like to explain two curves. The blue one is the government target. So it was an input parameter of testing the policy, how it would affect the system, how it would affect the costs. But then there was also the red, which we called Plexus Optimum. Plexus was the modeling software where we said like, okay, we do not give any restrictions. We just ask for the least cost. And what we see, it's nicely close to each other, but even in some years or most of the years, it's beyond the government targets. We also looked at low demand, which has a similar range, and we had a reference scenario, the no further VRE, where we said like, okay, if VRE are not further installed, what would be the total cost? And it's an important one to identify the cost and the cost benefits of VRE. I would like to raise your attention to this part, because this is when VRE are taking up, if the right decisions are taken, and I think they are underway, because before that, this would be next year and the year after. It's not possible because you need some 1 year or 2 years time ahead. And then you would see that in all the scenarios, even in the no VRE scenario, the installation capacity goes up. This is because there's some committed capacity, but you also see that in the low scenario, it's also picking up because there's a kind of need for VRE or cost benefit. Coming to the main conclusions. So continuously growing share is optimum. So from this 4 or 5% at the moment to 30% in 2030, which is about 20% in terms of energy. This is a mix of PV and wind. We have maybe 3/4 of PV and 1/4 of wind, depending on the scenario, but even above the 30%. So government targets are highly competitive compared to other sources, non-VRE sources, but above these targets, it's even more optimal or more beneficial. So there's some further room to expand it. But to come there, and I will come back here to this point, it has to start immediately. And to put it into figures, like it would mean 150 to 200 megawatt per month. And this is maybe one important message, is that this continuous growth is important to get the benefits of VRE. And the benefits, and there we come to the next slides, will already happen in the next years if it's installed. Here you see a cost comparison. So the baseline was the no VRE scenario. So if no further wind or PV is installed. And you see that after even after 2 years, there's a slight benefit. So the net costs are positive, and there are cost savings, even considering the capital expenditure. And it's mainly because of the fuel savings from fossil generation. And then it's really taking off, going towards 500 million or even above 1,000 million per year. This is not discounted US dollars to show the effect. So we have lower system cost, but we also have benefits beyond. But coming to the cost part. So VRE are part of the least cost expansion, and it's nicely complement each other with hydropower. So they go quite nicely with each other, adding the flexibility which is needed by the system. What I already explained on the previous slide, that even under a low demand scenario, and what we're experiencing now is a low demand scenario with weaker economic growth, it's still part of the least cost expansion. So there's some room in the current system to, let's say, digest the VRE and reduce the costs. It's doing it partly by replacing the existing generation facility by fuel saving or saving of other variable operational costs. So they are no longer competitive to run. So VRE is taking over part of the generation. And these costs, of course, include all the costs which are induced by this variability of VRE. So the partial load of the conventional power plants is considered, where the efficiency goes down, and also the additional reserve which is required for solar and wind-based generation. And because it's a very important discussion at the moment, battery storage was not considered in the main scenarios for various reasons, but we had a sub-scenario, and we came to the conclusion that battery storage, through the flexibility and additional benefits, could even further reduce the cost and would allow an even higher share of VRE. I was talking about the cost now, but there are many other reasons to include VRE, in particular in the Pakistan systems, and maybe some are even more important than only looking at the cost. You will have a quite diversified generation if you compare the no further VRE, like so where there's no wind and PV installed in addition from the currently 4%. In the future, it will be only 3% because this about 2 gigawatt will remain. And you will see that, of course, hydropower is expanded, nuclear is there, and a lot of coal-based generation would be built. This is mainly in the south, the domestic coal in the Tar area. And in comparison to this, if VRE are added, you will have a bit more balanced distribution among the different sources. So a third from VRE, a third from hydropower, and a third from thermal generation. And VRE is not only one source, but it's split between the two technologies, wind and PV. And it's also distributed throughout the country. So even wind doesn't have to be installed in the main wind areas in the south. It can be also installed in other lower wind areas where it is also more beneficial in terms of security of supply. It also, we tested it, it serves as a risk mitigation measures. If there are delays of hydropower, then you could fill the plant for energy with thermal generation. but you can also ramp up the building of PV and wind to fill this delayed supply of energy from hydropower with cheaper cost from VRE. And there, unfortunately, hydropower delays all over the world, and it also happens in Pakistan due to the size of the projects. It's also mitigation measure for fuel price hikes, ups and downs for imported gas and petroleum products, but also against environmental and social costs. VRE will also help to increase the non-carbon share of energy to some 80% in 2030, which is doubling from today. And this comes from hydropower, also from nuclear, but VRE is really adding to this very high non-carbon share of energy. And without VRE, it would not be possible because it's limited to install this hydro capacity, for example. And I think I started with it on the other slide. Again, I would like to raise that hydropower has a particular position in Pakistan. It's an opportunity, but to fully utilize this opportunity, the use has also to be changed in future, that it's run in a more flexible way. Coming to the emissions, this was not the primary purpose of our analysis. So the emissions you see here, which are growing in total, of course, because the system is growing, were just reported. It was not a restriction. There's now a cap on CO2 emission in Pakistan. There's no price. But what we see that a comparison of the optimum or the government scenario really reduced the emissions. What I mentioned in the previous slide, that due to this very high share of non-carbon sources, we keep the emission at a low level. And this is just the result of a cost effect, because in comparison to VRE together with hydropower, conventional sources, gas-based and imported coal-based, they are no longer competitive. And even domestic coal, at least until 2033 or some years longer, is not competitive despite the very, very low cost. And we had a no further coal scenario where we just said, like, okay, no, the only restriction is not to allow any further coal. This comes at the same cost as the government VRE scenario. So the no coal scenario really would limit the emissions, the effect on the climate, at the same cost of the government scenario, which has higher emissions in the long term. And we, if environmental costs are considered of the CO2, the cost for the climate, it's clear. Then there is no further fossil fuel-based generation, and it's solely a mix of VRE and hydropower in the future system. So VRE will help to keep the emissions down, and which might be an interesting issue in the current discussion, which we have in Europe, but as an importing area, exporting economic region, it might be an opportunity for so-called low carbon goods on the international market. It's an opportunity Pakistan has now, but it might could sustain it in the future with VRE. There are a lot of there are some challenges, of course, and the main is on the grid infrastructure, which has to be expanded. But this expansion, we found out, is needed in most cases anyway, with or without VRE, to transfer the system into a modern state-of-the-art system with the quality and security of supply you should have. So, but a higher VRE share will need a reinforced grid, and also for the operation, you need a better system, which is currently under implementation, the so-called SCADA. And you also should use the flexibility which are already there in the existing power plants. They are currently not utilized, but there are ways to utilize this technical flexibility. And of course, there's a higher reserve margin, but if you can pay attention to the right, like where we showed in light blue, the reserve margin, which is required from the system without VRE, and this, the reserve margin which is required on top through VRE. And for example, in the long term, in this scenario, we have 70,000 megawatt of PV and wind. And this is only, let's say, doubling the reserve requirement. This was an important analysis to see, like, okay, it needs some additional reserves, but these costs are you can calculate these costs, and the system is able to provide it. In part also because a central VRE forecasting can help to mitigate the variability. So it's not that the system has to follow the PV and wind all the time, but that you can reduce the uncertainty of VRE. And most of the technologies, I'm repeating myself now from the beginning, are measures of so-called no regret. So the control technologies, the better reserves are needed in the system anyway, including, for example, a review of the grid code. And VRE has some positive effects on the network because you may even save cost for the intra-regional transmission, because if there's a coal expansion in the south, you have to increase the transmission capacity from the south to the Punjab, Lahore area. But VRE, mainly PV, can be built closer to the demand centers, which actually saves cost, and you find the results in the report. Coming to an end, I would like to provide two issues, the methodology and overview, but I think the Q&As will probably provide more input to discuss. I think a success factor for a methodology was a database with official data. We reviewed together with NTDC, which allowed us to simulate the existing system, which the actual constraints, for example, on fuel supply contracts, the actual efficiencies of the power plants, but also the hydropower plants. Although they are asked to be more flexible, we put it in a range which is technically possible for these plants. So, and this database of official data helped us. We looked at this stretch, what I call stretch in the beginning. So this geographic and seasonal distribution. You see it on the map here, where we have the load center in the north and the hydropower there, and we have some generation, the thermal generation in the south. And of course, the resources of VRE, they differ between these different regions, PV and more also the wind. So we had a 3-zone approach where we differentiated demand, VRE resources, and the other generation. And we optimized it for 12 representative days, so 1 day per month, so to consider also the daily seasonal characteristics for this 20-year period. We tested the results with a lot of scenarios and sub-scenarios to test them whether they are stable. They are. And what I mentioned before already, we also considered these operational criteria for the system reliability in the long-term expansion planning, which is now possible with nowadays tools. And there I would like to mention Plexus software, which is a commercial software where we provided some also tailor-made interfaces. And this was based on a decision by the government and NTDC to use this state-of-the-art software also for their expansion planning exercise. Coming to the final slide on lessons learned. From a consultant point of view, we really have to say it was the right study at the right time with the right stakeholders, and the credits, I think they go to both NTDC and the World Bank, because we can provide some input. We can, of course, facilitate processes, but the decision on the study and the availability and also the openness and willingness to cooperate and to exchange know-how has to be there. And it was there on the highest level, on the top management from the ministry, but also on the level of the planners. And it was a very highly flexible approach we've done. And again, the credits go to NTDC and World Bank, because, for example, we had a scoping mission at the beginning because the scope of the project did not 100% fit the stakeholders' expectations. So we had the possibility to adapt it also according to the available data. I think we had a quite balanced combination of local presence with international experts, with our local partners, but also with online communication, and which also helped us in the last weeks of the project when Corona popped up, unfortunately. And it was also a suitable duration with more than a year. Less than a year wouldn't have been possible to allow for the above issues. I'm coming to an end, and I'm looking forward to the questions later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karsten. Great, very thorough presentation. And the good news is that, you have tons of questions waiting for you. And I would actually ask you if you could go into the Q&A box and perhaps start answering some by text, and then, seeing which ones we can answer live. And Salis, now the floor is yours. It's your time to for your delivery. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I will try to cover the maximum stuff within the minimum possible time. I'm so happy to be involved for this invaluable intervention, variable renewable energy integration and planning study by World Bank through Tractable, right from the day one. I clearly recall designing of this intervention, monitoring through steering committee at Power Division, Ministry of Energy, Government of Pakistan, close and regular interactions with Tractable professionals through their visits to Lahore and Islamabad, Pakistan, as well as virtually through dozens of Zoom, Skype meetings, and hundreds of emails, text messages, which was a routine matter. In addition, I also recall 4 workshops with stakeholders, power sector stakeholders, at different milestones, which were proactively attended and appreciated by the whole power sector. The final report, which was launched last month, is very important for NTDC in view of the recently approved, notified Pakistan's alternate and energy ARE policy 2019, as well as our close involvement during the whole process of this study. So at NTDC, we are totally convinced that through this important study, we have been benefited in multiple terms very quickly. Number one, review and fine tuning of NTDC's long-term demand forecast process. We had quite a few suggestions put forward by the consultants, then generation planning, then optimization processes, and dispatch diagnosis. Secondly, it helped Government of Pakistan. This was very important. It helped Government of Pakistan in setting the aggressive targets of renewable energy by the year 2025 and 2030 through ARE policy, of course. In fact, findings of this study, this current study, provided the basis for setting such aggressive targets. And thirdly, this effort supported the load forecast and generation planning team of NTDC in submission of Indicative Generation Capacity Expansion Plan, IGCP 2047, to the Electricity Regulator of Pakistan, NEPRA, in April this year for their review and approval. This support included input data preparation and review of model development using Plexo software, as Mr. Karsten said, for this purpose. Finally, capacity building of our team from load forecast as well as generation planning during the whole process. This is invaluable, I'm sure, because of this. Actually, we have started the journey of becoming an expert team of generation planning over the years. Team is, I've been saying this, many platform team is relatively young, but everybody is so much enthusiastic and they have been so lucky to have Tractable with them all the time. And it's very important to extend our thanks to World Bank and the extended support which have been effectively complemented the efforts of NTDC in building a team for preparing and updating IGCP, which is an important regulatory obligation on the part of NTDC. On behalf of NTDC as well as load forecast and generation planning team, I would like to communicate that based on this capacity building intervention, the team will continue its learning process, improving and delivering through the preparation and updating of IGCP. We are thankful to the bank for another critical support, which is very important in my opinion, as they managed a 2-day training on Plexus software for power sector professionals, especially of NTDC, conducted by the 2 professionals from Energy Exemplar Australia in Lahore in January 2019, right, about 2 years ago. And that too in a situation when the Plexus was not finalized, procurement was not done at that time. And I would like to add here that during the whole process of this intervention, NTTC has been extremely lucky to have the services of Tractor Bell and Mr. Carsten and his colleagues, including Mr. Achim. They have been available and attentive to all of our questions and queries and ideas. The team has been thoroughly professional and we have learned a lot from them. In my opinion, it remains the best gain of this investment by the bank. And let me say something about the study now, focusing on the technical part of it. The technical and modeling work for this study utilizes power system data provided by NTDC and other relevant agencies. Detailed consultations were carried out with NTDC departments throughout the entire process, consisting of 4 workshops and regular technical level meetings. This study will not only set targets of variable renewable energy penetration in Pakistan, but also future pathways and gaps that are required to be analyzed and work on for the sustainable development of the power sector. At NTDC, we understand, we are clear about it, that for achieving the renewable energy targets set through ARE policy 2019, we need to make sufficient investments in the transmission system, including modern automation and control systems and a reliable forecasting system. And we are also convinced that with political commitment, of course, it is very important, investment in technical capacity and planning tools and flexibility on the part of existing operators and investors, Pakistan is in a strong position to reap the benefits of greater reliance on our indigenous resources of solar and wind particularly. I believe at this stage, it would be appropriate to quickly apprise the participants of this webinar about the latest status with respect to IGCP. We can understand how this study fits into the ongoing work. First of all, I would like to inform that as of October 2020, NTDC launched the preparation of next iteration of IGCP, which is to be submitted by NEPRA by 15th of April 2021, pursuant to the provisions of the grid code. And secondly, based on our learning from the last iteration of IGCP, that was IGCP 2040, and the findings of this particular study, we have improved the data input form in consultation with experts from the industry, as well as Tractor Bell professionals. And thirdly, project execution entities are now able to provide their relevant project data, input data over the internet. We believe that it will bring more transparency to the process and add value to the output in terms of consistency and acceptance across the sector. Then this year, so far, NTDC has conducted 3 workshops, starting from 26th of October, then 3rd of November, 11th of November, for assisting the project execution teams in preparing and submitting the project data. Almost all the project execution entities have already gone through the process by joining these workshops, and we are getting the data. We are hoping we are confident that we will be able to close the data by 31st of December. And then we are working on directions communicated by the regulator, NEPRA, for improving the IGCP, and looking forward to assist the Power Division Ministry of Energy in finalizing the assumption set for IGCP next iteration and making consensus, which is very important, particularly among the stakeholders, particularly among the provinces, over the finalized assumption set for IGCP. Then subsequent to the approval of IGCP, hopefully early next year, NTDC will undertake preparation of transmission system expansion plan, which is a critical activity for NTDC and for the power sector as well. And ultimately, we will develop NTDC's transmission investment plan based on both this generation and transmission plans. Meanwhile, there is another significant progress, very important for Pakistan power sector. AEDB, Alternative Energy Development Board, the renewable energy arm of Government of Pakistan, is busy in managing the competitive bidding process for upscaling the quantum of on-grid renewable energy based on the projections optimization by the IGCP. And remember that this study by World Bank and Tractable have contributed significantly as far as the model of IGCP is concerned. And these days, our load forecast and generation transmission planning team is undergoing advanced training on Opgen of PSR Suite, which is another software for generation planning procured by NTDC, addition to Plexos. And NTDC plans to prepare our next iteration of the IGCP in all three softwares, Plexos, Opgen, as well as VAST4, the old horse. And we believe that this will add to the capacity, knowledge, and understanding of the team with respect to generation planning. And NTDC, of course, NTDC looks forward to invest generously on the capacity building of NTDC team with special focus on modern techniques and methodologies for generation planning. I personally strongly expect that the bank will continue supporting NTDC and other power sector stakeholder entities in Pakistan for facilitating technical support for achieving a sustainable power sector in the best interest of people of Pakistan. So thank you very much. I'm of course available for questions. And if ma'am, you allow me, I have noted one question about coal, that when the whole world
Please go ahead. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Salis.
When the whole world is shying away from coal, why Pakistan is considering coal at this moment, at this point in time? And I think it's very important to have diversity in the energy mix of any power sector. Pakistan is not an exception. And when we have diversity, and that too based on the indigenous resources, so that actually adds to the energy security of Pakistan. So we should not be worried about coal, in my opinion. It's not that much, and particularly when we are going to have very aggressive, inshallah, we are going to meet these aggressive targets set by ARE policy 2019. Remember that at this stage, it's about only 4 to 5% renewable of the installed capacity. So we are talking of 30% by during the next 10 years. So that means that renewable will grow like anything. And of course, it will be a different kind of energy mix. It will be rather clean. And as Mr. Carsten said, that it's well complemented. The renewable addition is well complemented by hydro. And so most of our energy mix part will be based on the indigenous resources. And we should not be, and we will not be importing coal, and we'll be adding diversity. So the coal has got its case for being added in the generation mix of Pakistan, in our opinion. So maybe now you can undertake more questions, and I'm all available.
Thank you very much. That was a difficult question to answer, so thank you very much for taking the lead in there. Also, I take advantage of this opportunity to tell everyone that we're going to allow a little bit more time because we only have 10 minutes until the hour. We're going to extend the session a little bit more, about 15 minutes more, so that many questions can be answered, because at the moment we have 31 open, plus we have 3 sent by YouTube. So we're not going to have time for all of them, even if we do rapid fire, because there is a lot of them, but we will try to handle as many as possible that are sent. And thank you very much for all the speakers. You know, obviously what you're talking about is generating a lot of questions, of chatter, you know, of talk. So this is always good news. And if you allow me, what I will do is I will start asking from the top of the questions, and whomever of you wants to take them can take them. Already Karsten and Oliver have been doing a very good job answering them by text, but even if they were doing a very good job, they answer 13, but more and more are open all the time. So they keep on growing the amount. So I'm going to do that. And Karsten, Oliver, and of course, Alice, if you see any questions that are specifically important that you want to answer, please let me know, and we'll answer those first, no problem. But let's start with the first one on the list that says it's from an anonymous attendee that is asking that there's many countries that are deploying battery energy storage systems, but in Pakistan, these battery energy storage systems are not considered. Is NTDC or the NEPRA working on battery energy storage systems? And Salis, I'm guessing this is for you, but I'm letting it open for everyone.
Yeah. Actually, it was touched by Mr. Carson already that, of course, we did not consider it for the last iteration, but for the upcoming iteration, we are actually going to start within a few days a short-term study with the foreign consultants about the right addition of right quantum of battery storage and some other options as well. We are going to actually replace the OCGTs, which have somehow not been appreciated by our regulator as well as some other project execution entities and other stakeholders. So these days we are preparing the TORs and finalizing all administrative matters. Within next 4 to 6 weeks, we are confident that the study will be finished. It's a short-term study. And next iteration by 15th of April, before 15th of April, we will come up with an IGCP version, which will definitely incorporate battery storage. We cannot ignore it anymore.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Salis. There is a question here, very quick, from Fernando that says, have you included any demand-side management and other type of energy efficiency actions into this study?
Yeah, actually, we have included a certain amount of megawatts as a factor in our existing load forecast and IGCP, but we were not that much satisfied. We wanted to actually take this. We were expecting from NICA to come up with some firm plans for it, and we are very happy to see strategic plans prepared by NICA. First time they have prepared it. It's, I believe it's a 3-year plan, 2022-23. And based on that, we are confident that this weak area of IGCP, because of not that proactive input from the concerned agency, now this will be covered in the next version, like battery storage. I'm very hopeful that they have come up, since this NICA has come up with a firm plan, with a nice plan, a strategic plan for the next 3 years. So, and it includes power sector as a major area of intervention. So this will definitely be covered in the next iteration, which is just 3 to 4 months away.
Excellent.
I would like to add to this, yes. Just mentioning again the report, because we have a disruptive technology scenario in the report, which also considers this effect, but also mix it with other issues, for example, electric vehicle charging. And you may find further information there. And this was also, of course, prepared together with NTDC and their assumptions, what was mentioned by.
You know, guys, I am very happily surprised by the technicality of all of these questions, so some of them you've already spoken about the topics, but perhaps I'm not specifically, so I'm just going to read them, and please, anytime if you see any questions, because I know that you're checking, Oliver, you as well, let me know if there is any specific ones you want to answer, because there is so many of them that we're not going to have time for all. Mm-hmm. But the next one goes on about coal plants, and it says, based on the IGCEP 2047 and current construction of thermal power plants, will it limit the uptake of renewable energy in the future as the government is locked into coal power plants? Is there also a risk of the short-term overcapacity, so not so much renewable energy and thermal power plants are needed as projected by the IGCP 2047, as T&D is the bottleneck? So the transmission and distribution, this is for you.
Let me say something very quickly, and then maybe Mr. Carsten also can add. But about Pakistan's position, we all know that this COVID-19 has adversely affected our economy, and of course the demand is stagnating. It's not that much, and we are going to have. Earlier we were having not a very pleasant position about our GDP growth. But still, we at NTDC and of course in consultation with other experts of the power sector, we believe that there are 3 to 4 initiatives by the government of Pakistan about like ease of doing business, then special economic zones, and then reforms at FBR. All these things, we are very confident that we are going to actually recover very quickly. And in terms of our GDP growth and increase in demand is definitely a big issue, and that is required. And of course, we all know that this will be increased, inshallah ta'ala, with the revival of our industry in Pakistan. That is one point. I'm sure that the other technologies are not going to hamper the addition of renewable energy as per ARE 2019 target, because government is very serious about it. The current government is very serious about renewable energy. And we know that this is first time that these targets have been, we are trying to jump from 5% roughly to 30% in 10 years. And so that other agencies are on board, and I don't see any problem about it. Of course, the whole supply chain process has to be very efficient, as Mr. Carsten said, that per year we are going to add a sizable quantum of renewable energy. So the capacity of power sector, the capacity of investor developers, as well as the project execution entities, that all matters. But I think everybody's upbeat since the government is very serious about renewable energy.
So I would like to add a few information because in the model we consider these constraints. Like we have different kinds of fuel contracts, the take or pay fuel contracts on the imported gas, which could be also sold alternatively at lower prices. We have the take or pay contracts for the imported coal, and we also have certain restrictions. I also answered one issue on the tar coal, because there are certain costs associated with the tar coal because the mining is connected to it. And if you do not take up the coal, there are costs. And this all we considered in the model. And sometimes it is cheaper for the system to reject the generation from the conventional sources and to provide VRE, but we also found out that this effect is not so much. There is actually a window in the actual system, a window for VRE to take a certain place, and the other sources to frame it. So it's not really a limit where there is the demand met by these obligations, and there's no room for further VRE. That's actually proven by our simulation.
Thales, we lost you there for a few seconds. You're back, so welcome back.
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
I don't know if you had anything else to add, or yeah?
I just want to add one thing that, of course, there are too many questions, and this is wonderful because this is a rare thing for a webinar, and definitely we are happy about it. And I would like to assure that we will respond all questions. If we can't do it today, we will definitely respond each and every question. Maybe we can set up a WhatsApp group for some time, and so that we can discuss these things there, and first respond these questions, and then counter questions can also be responded. And of course, our IGCP team is definitely enthusiastic about in responding, and of course, learning. This is our learning as well. So we are all available. And whatever is possible today, otherwise, I expect that you will be coming up with a WhatsApp group, and so that we can respond to as much as possible question.
So we can send you the questions, actually, no problem, because we have them on the system, and they can even be responded. We can even we can discuss how, but we can make this available as well. We can
Yes.
publish them
Okay.
once you've responded
Yeah.
them. So they'll be available in any case. And I think it's good that we're getting, to discuss all of us and see.
Yeah.
So let me keep going. This question, I'm going to shorten it a little bit because it basically asks, there are a lot of hydro projects. Most of them are in the public sector versus the private sector. Have you considering delays in the completion of the projects as part of how much this project costs? So, I mean, it's very simple. It's the one that Aruj Asgar sent. So have you considered delays in your calculations?
Yeah, now I will come to the mandate of NTDC. Actually, first time in the history of Pakistan, we are going to have an indicative generation capacity expansion plan, which is of course going to be approved, inshallah ta'ala, in the coming months. We are expecting it from the last 2 years, but now we are confident that we are very close to it. So there are anomalies in it. And we know that Pakistan has got a history in delaying the projects. The project delay is not a big deal, whatever project is there, power sector or other sectors. But now you see, let me first tell you about NTDC's mandate. Our mandate is to prepare this generation plan based on the input data received from the project execution entities. Now, project execution entities have to improve their data, their performance aligned with the whatever they have actually approved through this feasibility studies through panel of experts. And that data has been provided for the preparation of IGCP. So we know that there are delays, and like this COVID-19, for example, this is there, and inshallah ta'ala, it will be over very soon. But of course, delays are there because of it. But you know that people and professionals over the sector, they should realize that this is an indicative generation capacity expansion plan. This is not a firm plan. This is an indicative plan, and this every year by 15th of April, it is going to be updated. So this is as per the regulatory framework of as provided in the grid code, planning code chapter. So you see that every 15th of April, we have to come up according to the progress during the last year. So we need to make efficient our contractors, our project execution entities, and all these supply chain process. So otherwise, of course, delays will be there. And NTDC has no tool that how much delay is going to be done. We are dependent on the input from project execution entities. So if people ask us to make the whole Pakistan very efficient in terms of time and performance and all these things, it's very difficult, but it's not possible for us. Of course, we are trying to match the target of preparing and submitting this IGCP by 15th of April every year. For the last 2 years, we have been successful, and we undertake that we will come up inshallah ta'ala, every plan on the yearly basis in a timely manner. So the performance and the performance of all the stakeholders is required to be improved. NTDC is not actually mandated for this purpose. I hope that I'll be able to respond to the question, but it's a tricky thing. We all know that, but we are not actually, to be honest, we are not ready to assess or rationalize the CODs, because this is the task of concerned project execution entity. For example, if PPIB is doing certain projects, they are actually mandated to come up with some rationalized CODs as an input for the IGCP. So NTDC, this is not a task of, this is not the mandate, or doesn't cover our domain to rationalize the COD at our own. This is our point of view.
Thank you very much, Salis. Very thorough on the answer. One question here for Karsten, I believe. How are the environmental costs of emissions calculated in this study? Is there any practice in place for the recognizing of mitigation costs, particularly for thermal coal projects?
I think Oliver wanted to answer this. It's mentioned here, or should I?
No, it was, I'd marked it for you.
Okay. We used an approach which is common within the World Bank to assess projects, which has different scenarios on cost for the emissions per CO2 or CO2 equivalent, which puts, for example, an increasing cost of 40 up to $70 per ton on the emissions, which is based on other studies, what are the actual costs on the environment. And this is considered only in these sub-scenario externalities, because this is just, let's say at the moment, imaginary. But if in future such external costs were internalized, these externality scenarios would be a good representation on how it would change the expansion path. Maybe I also answer the next one on the climate change.
Yes. Please, can you read the question as well so people know?
Yeah, it was asked, climate change is very serious in the coming years. How is it considered in the planning? We should consider it in various ways, like, of course, the impact on climate. I just explained it, how we considered it, between putting cost, but also only reporting if there's no cap or no cost for emissions. But we also checked, for example, the hydrology for possible impact of the climate change on the hydrology. And also the demand. Within growing temperature, of course, the peak demand during the day, but also in the night with air condition is definitely going to grow. So yes, we considered it to a certain extent, but I think to a sufficient extent.
Is there any other questions, Oliver, that you have there that you'd like to ask? We have approximately 10 minutes, so I just want to make sure that we utilize them as best as possible. Or Salis, you have one?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, one question. Yes, there's a question by our very senior friend, I believe, the same Rashid Aziz Saib. Let me read the question first and then I will.
Yes, please go ahead.
The question is, to what extent are the models used for this study compatible with the integrated energy model, IEM, at the Planning Commission? And put it in another way, how extensive was the team's collaboration with Planning Commission? And so let me clearly admit it that this is another weakness of IGCP. And we have clearly written in the report that the output from IEP is a critical input for IGCEP. And we don't have IEP in place at this moment of time, as far as I know. And we have written it in the report that in the coming years, we expect Ministry of Planning Commission, this Planning of Development and Reforms, that they need to come up with a country level IEP, Integrated Energy Plan. And power sector is just one small subset of that plan. But that IEP is still missing. We are hoping that, I know that there is some intervention going on for the last some years with courtesy, with financial assistance, technical assistance from USAID. But as far as I know, we know that Planning Commission, this IEP is not in place at this moment. And we know about it that basically IGCP is just a subset, should be a subset of this IEP, but this is not available. And we have clearly written in the report that we expect that in a year or two, this IEP should be in place. So that means that we'll be knowing that after 30 or 40 years, where we are going in terms of hydro or renewable energy or nuclear or all other sources.
Excellent. Okay, since we have only a few minutes left, I'm going to let Karsten and Oliver also pick their questions. Just wanted to let you know one thing, guys. There is a survey that we're putting in the chats. If I could ask you to fill it in, it's just because it allows us to understand, how useful the session was to you and what else would you like to hear from our speakers and from other topics so that we can best cater for your business needs. Okay, so please take the survey. It takes literally 1 minute. It's really, really quick. And the more information you give us on what you want to hear, the more we can make sure that the content that we put together helps you in your day-to-day job. All right, I put you on the spot. Karsten, your question, and Salis, I'll go back to you again. So you pick another, please. Karsten?
There's a question, how do the two studies or reports, the IGCEP and VRE study, relate to each other? And I would say they are kind of brother and sister, so they come from the same family. Like the modeling approach is similar, and the database is mostly the same. But for example, for the modeling, we looked at the 3 zones because we wanted to have some network representation. but the requirement for NTDC is a different, because they do a fully fledged transmission plan. So they have a different model in this regard. And of course, the database which is used for the IGCP is a bit better because it's a bit newer. There was a new data request. So the changes within 6 months or 7 months are included in the IGCP, but not in the VRE study. But I think this will not change the overall result. But it's, I think, also described in the report how the two studies differ.
Carsten, could you also comment on how you treated distributed generation, small scale at the household level, etc.? That's one question in here.
We also had we did not differentiate it because we also looked at the overall level. We only differentiated between the zones because the PV is better in the south than in the north, but not so much. But there was a special distributed PV scenario where we looked at a particular share, I think 30% distributed PV, which comes at higher cost but lower losses. And a bit a lower energy yield, because if you put it on the rooftop, you might not have the inclination to the best. And we found that, of course, it's more costly than if you have the utility scale one, but it's still beneficial. So that's there's also, I think, for most of the questions, there's a sub scenario in the report.
Oliver, do you have any other questions you'd like to answer?
I think there is this question here on, is Pakistan in an overcapacity situation? And we cover this a bit in the communications around the report, which is that, yes, I think Pakistan has sufficient capacity right now. And a lot of people, of course, because historically things have been very tight, it feels like a big capacity surplus. And of course, with the COVID situation, that may be further accentuated. I think one of the messages that we put out with this report is that Pakistan does need to be very careful that this situation doesn't kind of prevent a forward-looking investment, because any power project takes many years to plan and develop and put in place. And so there is always this risk, and Pakistan's gone through several of these cycles of underinvestment, and then there's lots of power cuts, and then a big rush of investment, which is done in a hurry, which may not always be optimal, and then going into a period of surplus, and then repeating the cycle. So I think one of the things we were saying as a recommendation is, particularly when it comes to solar and wind, which of course can displace thermal plant and the fuel consumed by thermal plants, that the country does need to, even though it may be in a position of surplus right now, it does need to invest for the future, and it needs to start commissioning those plants, even though the situation now looks quite rosy. So I don't know if Salis, if you want to come in on that, but this is something that in our view is a bit of a risk, because the cycle of the past shows what happens if one isn't forward looking.
That is perfect opening.
Yeah, I just want to, I agree with Oliver. I just want to take up another question just within 1 minute. I think it will be clear.
No, go on. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
We won't deprive you of that.
Yeah, the question is that, considering ideal scenario that we achieve 25% RE in the energy mix by 2025 and 30% by 2030, what would be the energy purchase price PV by 2025 and 2030? So I don't have the report with me right now, but it is definitely available, and I can share it through email. The CPPA has prepared a forecasting of prices up till 2030, and that is definitely available in numbers, concrete numbers, and that was shared at the NEPRA during the this hearing in Islamabad on 15th of July. And I can, of course, share that report. Hopefully it is not confidential from NEPRA. We can ask CPPA and NEPRA about it, and I will definitely share it. That report is available with us.
Excellent. So is there anything else, Alice? Any last minute? I still allow you one more question if you're quick.
No, I think people should pray for us. As an old man, I would say that we don't expect gold medals for our team, but we definitely expect this certain appreciation and so that they can continue this good work. And they have been doing this for over 2 years now, and they are going again and again to NEPRA, and hopefully by next spring season, they will get a better news in terms of approval. And of course, we need to invest on their capacity as well. I am so happy about the young team. Apart from myself, everybody is young, everybody is enthusiastic, full of energy, and they are, inshallah ta'ala, going to deliver in the best interest of this country.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard, from these four experts, you asked questions. I know we haven't gotten to all of them. Honestly, it's practically impossible. We still have as many open as we've answered, but we will follow up. We will send these questions along to the speakers so that they can have a go at answering all of those by text, and then we can publish those as well. So please fill in the survey. Please download the report and read it. That's what it's there for. It has a lot of information. If you need to be put in touch with anyone on the team, we can help you. Without further ado, Oliver, I don't know if you want to say anything to close off.
No need. I think
no.
Salis did a very good job there. Thank you, Salis.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Salis, very much for being here today and for your attitude towards this and to answer all the questions. Thank you very much, Karsten, for sharing all of that know-how. And thank you very much, Oliver. And thank you very much to everyone in the audience. And we will see you next time. Thank you.